On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, Isaiah Hartenstein unlocks a lot for the Thunder, who have the right man on the bench to lead them this season, plus your mailbag questions.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and Inside the Thunder beat writer, Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're diving into the Thunder handling expectations, having the right man on the bench for the job, plus your mailbag questions, which include a look at Isaiah Hartenstein. Folks, we're back. Every single day from now until next August, 5 days a week, we will be here talking Thunder basketball at a minimum. And you know that in the season, most of the time we have to do 6 shows a week because we're going to cover every single game, including on weekends. So it's a lot of fun. Make sure you subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from. And also check out Locked On Sooners. Check out Locked On Pokes. Check out Locked On Big 12 College Football SEC. This is a massive week in the state of Oklahoma. Not only are the Thunder just around the corner, we'll talk to Sam Presti next week. We'll have Media Day a week after that. We'll be back in the preseason flow the week after that. It's all coming up Thunder soon. But right now, this is one of the biggest weeks of college football in the state of Oklahoma ever. The mighty Tennessee Volunteers coming to Norman. Game day's there. The A Crew's there. It's a night game in Norman. And up the road, the Pokes hosting the Utes. What a fun game that will be as well. So check out those shows. Check out every show on the Locked On Podcast Network. But thank you for making us your first listen. Let's talk about the Thunder. One thing that I've been thinking about recently is how much the Thunder nailed their coaching hire. And how much that when you get swept up in the day-to-day, right? When you get swept up in the minutia of 2 years ago, this team was projected to win 24 games and they go to the play-in. And last year, this team was projected, they get to the 6th seed. That's pretty good. And then they got to the number 1 overall seed. They won their first playoff series since 2016. When you get swept up in that, it's easy to lose the big picture of it all. But I take you back to the day that Mark Daigneault was hired, and the consensus around him was, well, this is kind of an anonymous coach. He's only ever coached, G League basketball. We can't even find his birthday. We don't know how old he is. We know that he likes Bruce Springsteen. And many people believed that Mark was just the coach here to sit on the bench and lose a ton of games and be there to eat up those losses. But eventually, he's just a bridge of the gap coach, and you move on to somebody else when this team's ready to win. But extremely quickly, after his first season began in Oklahoma City, you saw something completely different locally. I mean, the people who were paying attention locally, you can go back and listen. That season started in December, around Christmas time. By January, on this very podcast, you can find episodes where we're saying that Mark Daigneault's the best coach in Thunder history because it was evident back then how good he was. And it, of course, caught up to him now with the Coach of the Year honor a year ago. Now, CBS ranks him as the 6th best coach in the NBA. And you can flip that and say he's the highest rated coach that has not won a championship yet, according to CBS. But what I think that the Thunder got so right was their vision. It was their vision. What were the Thunder saying way back then? when Pokashevsky was the biggest young player to watch, along with, of course, Shea developing and such. They were saying that they want to play a positionless style. Everybody needs to be a playmaker. And that they want to have a really deep team. Check, check, check. What were the Thunder doing from the moment that Mark Daigneault goes on the sidelines? They were playing 10 guys, 11 guys, 12 guys a night. No offense to Jalen Horde. No offense to Josh Hall. No offense to Gabby Deck. Did not warrant it. Right? But it laid the foundation to get the most out of those teams. You go back and really dissect how good they were for a bad team. And that sounds, kind of like an oxymoron or whatever, but that team had really no business winning 22 games, 24 games, and being as good as they were defensively. Because typically, these teams are a laughing stock defensively whenever they're projected and they do lose that many games. But you saw the defense was there. You saw that he was able to maximize what he was given. He was not given the ingredients to make this gourmet meal. He was given the ingredients to make a grilled cheese, but he did it to perfection in those 2 seasons. And to get to the other side of that, you're seeing those philosophies. You're seeing that groundwork that he laid. You're seeing that come to life with a much better team now. So when you look around at the Thunder, what are their quote unquote problems? What are their worries? What are their question marks? Well, A, the Thunder are the favorites. And they have no player on this roster has experienced being the favorites, has experienced every single game coming with pressure and expectations. Because if you thought that the outrage and the outcry from losing that game in Detroit in January was bad, you have no idea what's in store for whenever they drop any game this season. Right or wrong, and I personally think it's wrong. I think that this season should not be judged on wins and losses. It should be judged on how prepared do they look to play playoff basketball. But that's not up for me to decide. It's up for you to react to. And the reactions to this season will have a lot more fluctuations. And as we've discussed all summer long, it is incredibly hard this year to get to a point where you say this year was a success. When you're projected to win 25 games and then you end up going to the play-in, no one can bicker or quabble with that success. When you're projected to go to the play-in, maybe get into the top 6, and you're the number 1 overall seed in the West, nobody can quabble with that's a success. The only way to get to that success mark this year is getting to the Western Conference Finals, and even then, there will be some people disappointed if that's all that they do, quote unquote, all that they do. But what's Mark so great at? Mark is so great at relating to players, getting the most out of them, and keeping a team together. And that's hard. I really want you to sit back today, because if you are listening to Locked On Thunder in September, you are a diehard basketball fan who cares about the NBA and who thinks about it incessantly. Go back and look at the Rockets and other teams who were of that era. Just look back 2-3 years. The teams that were losing 50 games a season with the Thunder had drama, had adversity, had bickering, had discontentment. The Thunder never had any of that. This team stuck together, and you look at how they played out that whole season. Each of the times that they were losing big. Till the very end, the Thunder played organized, consistent, quality basketball for what was given. Of course, it's tough to call a 20-something win season quality, but when the players stepped on the floor, they played to their best of their ability. They just purposefully were built to lose and not good enough. But you got everything you could get out of Isaiah Roby. You got everything you can get out of those guys that continue to show up and continue to put the work in and continue to play quality defense. And they didn't lose games because they were disorganized. They didn't lose games because they had bad habits. They lost games because this roster was supposed to lose. And because you purposefully did not have enough quality players. But I think that that's a real sign that Mark is going to be able to handle what comes with the territory of a young team who's never been in this spot before, getting thrown into not only just, hey, you're supposed to be good, but you're supposed to go win a championship. You're that good. At a minimum, most expect you to win the West. And again, you look up and down this roster, nobody's felt that before. Because even Alex Caruso, who played with LeBron James, and anytime that you see LeBron James on the court, you expect him to win. He was a massive part of that title run. But we can all agree that this is more so on Caruso than it was back then. Like, Caruso's a bigger part of what the Thunder are planning to do at this stage of the season than what he was for the Lakers at this stage of the season back then, right? And in September of that season, he was not factored into the equation as much as he is right now. He became that. He became a player who has a bunch of expectations, and that can help the Thunder. But again, it's a little bit different now. And Caruso is really the only guy that you can say felt that. And it's good to bring him in. And it's good that you brought him in who has the continuity with Mark. So the pressures, I think Mark can handle. Even though he's never done it before, that's me going out on a limb. And most of the time with coaches especially, we have a wait-and-see approach. It's why we're always a year too late to see how good these coaches are. But I called the shot back in January of 2020. I'll do it again here. Like, I think that he is going to be able to handle it. The other question is, well, how do you play all these guys? This team is so talented and so deep. How do you get them on the floor? Well, you get them on the floor by doing the same thing that Mark's done since day one. He's played 10, 11, 12, 13 guys since day one when they didn't deserve it, frankly. But now you've got 10, 11, 12, 13 guys that you really think have a shot to be high level or know for a fact that they're high level NBA players. At minimum, you can rattle off 10 guys who you want in that lineup. And then you can argue with 11, 12, 13. And that's a stark difference in how most coaches handle things. Most coaches, and you look at Tom Thibodeau, what he does with New York, like, most coaches don't handle it this way. But because you've trained every player on this roster with the continuity that they've had to do this and to be prepared for this and to look for this to happen, it becomes much easier now as your roster's improved and gotten to this point. And that's why I think that the Thunder are in such a unique position, because rarely does this happen. Rarely do you go hire someone, start a rebuild, lay out your plan, and you check all the boxes with no bumps in the road yet, with no issues popping up. They've accomplished everything they've wanted to accomplish to this point. And that's what's so exciting about the future. And we'll talk about your mailbag questions coming up, including how Isaiah Hartenstein, who they went out and got this offseason, unlocks this team. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel right now, because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, it's because there's something for everyone, including something a little different right now. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 weeks of a free trial for NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. And so when you do that, you can also have the YouTube TV base plan, where you can watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game right there. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel it at any time. Go to FanDuel.com right now. It's America's #1 sportsbook. And perhaps you only really like the NBA. You only watch the NBA. Guess what, folks? You can bet on the NBA right now. From opening night to future odds as the Thunder are the favorites to win the West, you can bet on that right now at FanDuel.com. Go there right now, FanDuel.com. We're back on the Oklahoma City Thunder Locked On Thunder podcast, your teams every day. Folks, we're here talking Thunder basketball. And what I think is so interesting about this season is it's the first season of expectations. It's the first season where you can really, puff your chest out there and believe that this team can go win a title. And with that becomes a different lens that you watch the season through. And so that brings us to our first mailbag question from @HogsFan 2001. What's the ceiling and floor for this team? Well, the ceiling is easy. The ceiling for this team is to win an NBA championship. This team can win the title. And that's just obvious. They're one of the deepest, if not the deepest team in the NBA. They for sure have the #1 guy. Like, Shea is a good enough player to where as the #1 option, you can win a title. And there's not very many teams that have that. The list of teams that for sure know that their number one option can go win them a title, few and far between. And I believe wholeheartedly that the Thunder have the complementary pieces and the rotation and the coach that is of championship caliber. The only thing the Thunder are waiting on is can J-Dub and can Chet become options 2 and 3 in whatever order to take you to that championship level. And what I think is so great that the Thunder have done is that's a great bet to make. I truly believe those two guys eventually, whether it's this year, next year, or whenever, will become an option 2 and 3 on a title team. And so long as they do that, everything else is in place. Your number one's in place, your rotation's in place, your depth's in place, your coach is in place, your GM's in place. Everything else is in place. You just need those two guys to come along. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a second-year player and a third-year player and what these two guys are. That's a lot of pressure. But listen, there's a lot of pressure on the 2 and 3 options in the NBA. This is life in the NBA. And it's going to come down to how those guys perform. Just like it came down to how Westbrook and Durant performed. Just like it comes down to how Luka and Kyrie perform. And it comes down to how Tatum and Brown perform. Like, that's life in the NBA when you're that good. And those two guys are that good. And they will be eventually. It's just a matter of the waiting game. You hurry up and wait to see when those two guys will get ready. So the ceiling is an NBA title. If those two guys are ready right now to be 2 and 3 in whatever order, this team will win the NBA championship. The floor, I think, is a second-round exit. And you can shiver at that, and you can say and balk and say how disappointing that would be, and whatever you want to comment about the second-round exit. But folks, if I told you on September 14th or 15th or 16th, 2023, that the Denver Nuggets would lose in the second round, you would have called me crazy. Because at that time we were talking about Denver never losing again, and they won the title, and they're going to be this team that's at the very top, this juggernaut. And they lost in the second round because the Western Conference is about matchups. It's about survival of the fittest. And there's so many talented teams. Like, you have to go through Dallas, Denver, Minnesota before you even talk about a surprise team. You've got to get through those guys. And those are very quality teams, like very, very, very high-level teams. And so if J-Dub and Chet aren't there, I mean, it's a tough look. Now, I will say this. The Thunder are way closer to hitting their ceiling than they are their floor. Because I look at last year's, second-round exit, where they lost in 6 games. They were a foul away from Game 7 in the Paycom Center. The point differential of that series, despite it ending in 6 games, was 0. And how abysmal the Thunder were without Chet Holmgren on the floor. And so for as much talk as you can have about J-Dub and how he didn't perform to your expectation level in the playoffs whenever you need some extra oomph from your stars, I also don't believe that this team will be that bad without Chet Holmgren on the floor. There's no way that they'll be as bad as they were in that Dallas series when Chet Holmgren rests, now that you have Isaiah Hartenstein. And I think that even that improvement alone, before you factor in Caruso for Giddey, before you factor in a step forward for J-Dub and Chet, that improvement alone changes that Maverick series and changes the narrative and changes how we're discussing these two teams right now this summer. So I do think that they are closer to an NBA championship team than they are their floor, but that's their floor. I don't foresee them losing in the first round to anybody. But in the second round, things get serious out west. And again, I point to Denver. I don't think that that'll be the outcome. If I had to pick between these two options, I would say the Thunder are more likely to win a championship. But that's the absolute floor. About the dunk. Should we expect the change to the starting lineup at the beginning of the season, or will Isaiah Joe keep his spot? How will Mark deal with the locker room fallout if Joe is demoted? Yeah, I mean, Derek Parker believes that Isaiah Joe's going to start. I'm not there, but I know Derek Parker is. You can go listen to that show from Friday. I just would assume it's going to be Shea, Caruso, Dort, Dub, Chet. I also know that Mark's going to explore the roster, experiment, and do other things that we've talked about Mark doing at the first segment of the show. what I'm more intrigued by than the starting lineup is all the different ways Isaiah Hartenstein opens things up for Oklahoma City. For one, and for most people in the Thunder fan base, this is the most appealing option. It's being able to play big, and being able to finally alleviate some of the size concerns and play him next to Chet. And look, using Chet in that Jaren Jackson Jr. role is going to look incredible for however many minutes that they play that lineup. But you can still play small while playing, and you can also now play big. But what I think is more important that he unlocks is the secondary scoring punch. Because yes, it's the same cast of characters for the most part in that secondary unit. But this is the best screen setter on the roster. This is the best screen setter that J-Dub's ever played with. And that alleviates some of the pressure of J-Dub to go, engineer an offense in that secondary unit. And I think that having the best backup center in the NBA, snap your finger and you fixed your biggest hole from a year ago of what got you ousted in the second round. So I just think that we can debate the starting lineup until the cows come home. My bet is on Shea, Caruso, Dort, Dub, Chet. But it's more interesting to discuss all the different ways that no matter who starts, that Hartenstein really takes this team to the next level. And I know that his basketball reference page is not sexy, but man, does it get the job done for what the Thunder need, what the Thunder want. So we'll continue your mailbag question with this one from Mr. Michael McAfee. What's the deal with Tennessee football and your fandom of Tennessee football? If you follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles, every Saturday so far, it's felt like 1998 when the Tennessee Vols won the national title. And it's a little perplexing as a lifelong Oklahoman. How did I become a Tennessee fan? Well, my dad's side of the family, my grandpa, is from Tennessee. So half of my lineage is from Tennessee. I grew up a lifelong Tennessee fan despite being born in Oklahoma and living in Oklahoma my whole life to this point. And I suffered through the Derek Dooley era, the Butch Jones era, the Jeremy Pruitt era. I was at that 2014 game in Norman where the fans were excellent. Couldn't walk 5 steps without being invited over to a tailgate. I imagine, though, things will be different Saturday. Whenever it's no longer a pat Tennessee fans on the head, oh, thanks for coming out trip. Because in 2014, everybody knew Tennessee was going to be terrible. They were starting Justin Worley from Rock Hill, South Carolina. It was a disaster. This year, not so much. This is going to be a very fun game. First ever SEC game for OU. A game in which OU is an underdog at home by 7 in the hook. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for this game. But that's how. And so we'll see. Go check out Locked On Sooners. Even check out Locked On Vols to see the other side of things for most of you. My side of things for me. But coming up, we're going to grade your hot takes to close out Monday's show. We're back on Locked On Thunder. We're back 5 days a week on the Locked On Thunder podcast. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere. And make sure you check out Locked On NBA, our national show talking NBA. There's no offseason for the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from a national and local experts in 20 minutes or less for you, hitting you all over your podcast feeds, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Let's react to your hot takes. So this one comes from LeBron James. The Thunder need a true power forward. That's your hot take. And sure, I can see this take. But I struggle to buy into that right now. I would rank the Thunder needing a table setter ahead of power forward as of this moment. And we'll see how the season plays out. We'll see where things go from here. But before seeing this team play, I would say a table setting creator off the bench, the Thunder would have a more priority need for than a power forward. Because they were so good a year ago playing small. And they were at their best when Chet was at the 5. And if there's matchups and if there's games and if there's situations where they're really getting hurt down low. Well, again, as we go back to the middle segment, Chet can play that Jaren Jackson Jr. role next to Hartenstein. J-Dub can play the 3. And now all of a sudden you're massive. But more often than not last year, Chet at the 5 and playing small was able to counteract and be flat out better than most teams. And the few times that it burns you, you now have the ability to fix it. And I'm here to tell you, there's nobody available to fill that role of a true power forward on the market right now than being able to play Chet next to Hartenstein for however many minutes that you need. Because the basis of this philosophy is still going to be Chet at the 5 eating up minutes for the majority of the game. Chet at the 5 is still going to be their bread and butter. They're only going to, quote unquote, need and play a true power forward whenever the game dictates it. And when the game dictates it and you do go to that change, you don't have a better option out there to go get than just simply putting Chet in that role. So that's kind of where I'm at with this team. I mean, they won 57 games a year ago and had a 0-point differential in the second round of the playoffs to the eventual West champs by playing Chet at the 5 and only playing 2% of their minutes with Chet and J. Will together. Now, will they play more than 2% of their minutes with Chet and Hartenstein? I have to imagine so. But that's still not going to be their identity. At Marvin Joe says, it's impossible for OKC to stay as healthy as they did a year ago. Impossible strong, obviously. But it is unlikely that OKC stays as healthy as they did a year ago. That's for sure. I totally agree with this hot take. It is unlikely that OKC stays as healthy as they did a year ago. I would also say the Thunder are presently better prepared to handle stretches without anyone on the roster than they were a year ago. Like anyone. Now, they can't handle it. No team can. If you lose Shea for the year, or Chet for the year, or J-Dub for 5 months, or J-Dub for 3 months, no team can withstand that. But you look back to last year, whenever their only 3-game losing streak came, whenever Shea had that quad injury for a week. And it was just kind of, oh goodness, whenever Shea was out. I don't think that'll be the case. Now, of course, they're not going to be as good, but they're going to be able to beat the Pacers. It's going to be a little different this year. And so you look at, now you have the ability to preserve your health a little bit more, actually. Because a year ago, I know that the Thunder, that Chet revealed on the Woj podcast, that the Thunder came to Chet and wanted to rest some games, rest some back-to-backs, whatever, and Chet fought vehemently to stay in, and he won the battle, so to say, the quote-unquote battle. But this year, you're no longer just surrendering without Chet. You have Hartenstein and J. Will who can patchwork together a couple of games. Whereas if you have a back-to-back and you play the Trailblazers on the front or back end, or the Hornets on the front and back end, or whoever, let's let Hartenstein take care of that, and let's get some blows for Chet, who we saw a year ago was fantastic on even 2 or 3 days of rest. Like, he doesn't need that much time to recharge, but whenever you give him time to recharge, oh my goodness. Like, Chet looks entirely different. Like most players would. So right there, you now can afford a Chet quote-unquote health concern of like, hey, he can't play all 82 again. Like, that's not the best use of efficiency for him. But now you can afford not to have him play all 82 games. And now with Shea and J-Dub, like, if you take J-Dub off the floor, you still feel confident that, like, they can make it work for a game as necessary. So I just think they're a deeper team, a better team. But again, no team can handle missing those top 3 guys for any significant amount of time. But missing them for a week at a time, they can more handle that now than they could have a year ago, whenever they didn't need to handle it because they had supreme injury luck. And the odds say that will not happen again. But it's also impossible to predict because, like, you look at J-Dub. What hindered J-Dub a year ago was his ankle injuries that stemmed from stepping on a camera guy on the baseline. It was nothing that J-Dub did wrong, nothing that the camera guy did wrong, nothing that anything went awry. It's just the nature of playing basketball. Like, you look at Shea's injury. He got elbowed in the quad. He got elbowed. I mean, okay. So there's no need to fret a potential health scare or not. And they could stay as healthy as they did a year ago, or they could suffer some bumps and bruises along the way. And either way, I think the Thunder are prepared. As long as they're healthy by the postseason, that's all that really matters anymore for Oklahoma City. Thank you all for listening to today's Locked On Thunder podcast. Back tomorrow talking OKC Thunder. Drop your comments, questions, concerns on YouTube, on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.